Hey friends, Seeking Our Spirit is back, episode 51. A new friend of mine, Jennifer Manaker. Had a great time talking with Jennifer about her organization practice, her business, Praise the Light, and her good work there, and also got to enjoy her story. So I hope you enjoy it as well. As always, support the show by coming forward and telling your story, sharing, or giving me folks, sending me names of folks that you think would be good on the show. As always, you can call in and share a story as well, confidentially or not. It's 615-933-9737. Just tell a story of spirituality or of an experience that you had, and we'll share that and talk about it. As always, keep on sharing the episodes and hitting all those important buttons and subscribe and support. Really appreciate all the love. So we'll keep it going, and we'll talk to you soon. Peace. All right, so we are rolling. Good morning, Jennifer Manaker. It is good to be with you. Thanks for coming out and talking to someone you've never met. As I was saying before, that's always very meaningful to me, so thank you. And shout out to Jordan Simmons again for connecting us. So Jennifer Manaker, Praise the Light, is your company, your personal company,
yes,
right?
Yes, I'm the founder.
So we'll get to talk a little bit about that, of course, today. But to jump in, why don't you tell folks a little bit about that, a little bit about you, just easy bio. Who are you? Okay. What you do?
Okay. My name is Jennifer Manaker, and I am the founder of Praise the Light. It's a total wellness coaching experience focusing on mental health. Mm-hmm. I offer yoga, meditation, and acceptance and integration training. I've been in healthcare for over 20 years, and I currently work as a nurse practitioner at Blunt Memorial Hospital in internal medicine. About 10 years ago, I started practicing yoga as a way to deal with some anxiety and stress in my life that I was experiencing. And it was just very transformative. So then I always want to share what I know with others and help others. It's part of that caretaker healer that I have within me. And so I became a yoga teacher. So then that's how that grew. Yeah. And then I had a couple personal crises that I was going through, changes. Mm-hmm. And so I was in therapy, and one of the therapists told me about a new training technique called acceptance and integration training, and so I practiced that alongside her for several years. Mm-hmm. And it was so transformative. I really felt a connection to God in a way that I had never felt before. And the self-acceptance piece that it teaches was really profound, and I essentially graduated therapy. Mm-hmm. And my trainer said, you need to do this. You have something within you, and I believe you could help others. So she recommended that I go through the acceptance and integration training to become a trainer for individuals. So I completed that training. It was a little over 7 months. I also completed a life coaching program and created my business.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah. And how long ago did you create the business?
A few months ago.
Okay.
So, it's been working over a year, mm-hmm. but with offering the AAIT services to clients, mm-hmm. a few months.
Cool. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, exciting. Congrats on that.
Thank you.
That's fun. Well, and I love just the part of your story that, so these things that you're offering are things that you have found benefit from yourself, have experienced yourself.
Saved my life.
Yeah.
Saved my life.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell folks a little bit about AIT, just what that is, before we get in deeper?
Sure. So acceptance and integration training is you are sitting down with the client, and there's the foundational principles of it: self-acceptance, resolving reactivity, integrating opposites. We live in a world of opposites, night, day, mm-hmm. Hot and cold, anger, happiness, right? They're all opposites. So you're teaching someone how to take these energies. It's self-awareness. So energies that you have that cause reactivity that can cause harm, mm-hmm. right? Maybe you're sad all the time and you don't know how to feel happy. And so you work with the client and teach them this self-awareness about emotions and charged energy and how to resolve it through the practices. So you're taking, say somebody's dealing with anger. You don't have to sit down and have hour-long sessions and talk about all their past. People don't like that. And I think there's such a huge stigma to therapy, like there's something wrong with you, right? So acceptance and integration training teaches the individual that you're good just who you are. You're separating the conditioned self from your true self and looking at all of those things, your history, your trauma, your experiences, how those are things that just happen. So it separates the why. You don't really think about the why. It just is what it is.
Or like associating it with your value.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. So you're separating this false conditioned self from who you really are, and that you are okay just who you are. You're not your story, if that makes sense. Your story is beautiful.
Yeah.
It shapes you as an individual, but you're not condemned by it, if you will. So there's about 30 protocols.
Sounds like a sermon that I get.
Yeah, right.
You are loved.
Right. No, but that's the biggest piece of when you get down to it. A lot of it is people don't love themselves. People think they're inherently bad. But you can't have the bad without the good. And so it's connecting to that light within. And that's also why I named my company Praise the Light, because at the end of each protocol that you do in the training, you fill yourself full of light. You fill all those areas where anxiety or sadness or whatever that negative charged emotion is, you fill that full of light, and that light's all around you. And for me, that's very much God.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. Man, that lines up right up with a lot of things in my world. People hear me say all the time that I think, the largest block that most people have to accept, you can't accept the idea that this higher power or creator or God, whatever we call this, loves you completely, no strings attached, if you don't know how to love yourself. And there's so many people that sit in the pews that they come with guilt, with hang-ups, with all this stuff, and they're the very same thing you're talking about. They think that means that they are bad somehow or unworthy. And so all this messaging, at least that in my church context, is always like God is love. I know those aren't always the messages coming from different flavors of church, but in the Episcopal Church, it very much is. And there tends to be a big block that a lot of people have, where they just can't accept that. And so without going through kind of work like this, really. So you are learning how to, it's really identity work too, but it's fast, it's quick, people, I was in therapy for several years talking about the same thing over and over again and never making any changes, never figuring out what was really within, because that's scary to look at and work on. And there's freedom in that self-acceptance and understanding that you are loved, and God doesn't make junk, right? So we're all created in that way, that we're all beautiful and deserve to be loved, and loving ourselves is really where it starts. So go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. You're just making me click with all these things. I mean, that really is, in Christianity, people talk about the fall, right?
Yes.
And I actually, and this maybe is just Brett, but what you just described is how I reinterpret what I think the quote unquote the fall is, right? It's this thing that we just for some reason have within us as humans that think we think we're separate from God, or we think we're unworthy, or we think, and really the whole point is, no, you're not. We say things like the divine spark. We all have, a spark of God or a piece of God in us. But again, it's just naming again that disconnect that people have with that idea and what they really feel.
And the idea of you have to complete all of these steps so you're good, and then you're deserving of this love. So then you have children too, right? So depression, anxiety starts at a very young age. And I think one of the most detrimental mindsets is thinking, well, I'm not good enough as I am. I have to do X, Y, and Z to be good or to be loved by God. And that's not the case.
No, not at all. Yeah.
And I think that shies people away from faith because they're afraid of the judgment.
Yes.
So, AAIT takes away all the judgment of who you are and accepting all the parts of you. They are just what they are. And you learn a lot about yourself. So it provides insight to the true self. So you're separating the false conditioned self of what you're being told. Parents. So it's generational trauma, all that. And maybe what you were told in the church too. You know,
can
depending.
be. Yeah.
Professionally, it separates all of that stuff, all those scars. And it eventually you come to this place of where you are operating at a higher level of consciousness. So stuff that used to make you angry or make you reactive, you're just like, oh, well, that happened. That's okay. It's not going to rock me today. So,
nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're reminding me a little bit too, and we'll dive into your story, but some of what I hear and what you're describing is also just the acceptance of like we do so much in our life where we experience emotions, but we don't truly process them. We just shove them down. And so I don't know if that's correct, but some of what I'm hearing you say is like, this is helping people, like you, in some way you walk through it and accept it.
Yeah. You can't resolve it unless you feel it. So what resists persists, right? So if you have anger and pain from a trauma, if you don't feel it, you can't process it and move through it. And people are afraid to do that work because they don't understand that there's freedom on the other side of that.
Exactly.
So we walk through suffering. We're designed to have suffering in our lives because it's going to teach us something. And then there's peace on the other side of that. So again, with AAIT is not as intimidating or scary once you start practicing it, because maybe you have a trauma, something bad that happened in your life, and you feel it for a second. And then you replace it with something good. You feel it for just a minute and you process it. It's not reliving the trauma over and over again.
Because that's another, I just was listening to someone talk about this the other day. That's one, not saying therapy's bad, obviously wonderful in a lot of ways, but some people can have experience in therapy where it's almost like instead of processing the trauma, they're reliving it in an unhealthy way. They're always in it.
Yes.
Does that make sense? So you go to therapy and you're just constantly talking about and living in the thing that is the problem, and you're never moving beyond it. So it's almost like creating this, like, I'm just living in this traumatized state always. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. There's no alleviation of suffering. So when you integrate two opposite polarities, right, the good and the bad, when you integrate those, that alleviates your psychological suffering. So you go through something and you can always find something good in something bad. You can always find something bad in something good.
There's so much theology intersects with this stuff. You said something a minute ago. You said something about we're designed for suffering.
No, I think the human condition, suffering is part of the human condition.
Okay.
And so every human is going to experience suffering in their life. And your experience of that and how you handle it and move forward, it's freedom. They're lessons that are learned. It shapes your life. It doesn't have to be detrimental. It's not the end of your story. In abuse and divorce or something that's traumatic that happens in your life. That's something that occurred in your life. It's separating, well, all this suffering happened to me. Why do I deserve this? Why can't I get past this? This hurts so bad. And then they live that life of sadness, depression. They can't get out of it, right? Because they don't understand that they have it within themselves. That's the God piece within them. They can actually be okay and resolve this reactivity they have from experiencing it. So I teach people that they are in charge of their experience. They are in charge of their healing. They're not sentenced to the suffering that they experience. It just reminded me of just the age-old debate in theology of the problem of suffering, right? And it's like, why? In some way, the way you said it made me think of like, yes, suffering is actually supposed to be part of life because it makes us grow, and this is part of that debate, because people will say, well, why is there this suffering if God is benevolent and all-knowing and all-powerful? And it's always a conundrum, but that is one, the suffering in some ways does bring
growth in us, or does bring
and gratitude for what you have. You couldn't know happiness without knowing sadness.
Right.
And I was thinking about that on the way over here, because people always ask, well, why did this happen to me? This is so hard. I didn't deserve this. And God's plan is so much bigger than we realize. And our story is, we're not in charge of that. We're not in control of it. We are in charge of how we experience life. But that's the faith piece, that no matter what happens, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And then the
trusting
other,
in him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other intersect that's interesting is like the sort of mystic tradition of Christianity, the Desert Fathers that we talk about. Same thing. They talk about how, like, once you see the type of stuff we're talking about, you see that even the suffering itself is beautiful somehow and is holy. Like, they're able to see the beauty. They're able to see God in even the things that people normally would say are bad or suffering or not of God. They say, no, this is all of. But anyway, okay. So I want to walk through your story a little bit, because I'm going to have to come maybe do this with you at some point, because
absolutely,
I love it. It's very interesting to me. So okay, let's walk through just a little bit of Jennifer's personal, like, spiritual timeline. For you, growing up, when you think about spirituality in your life, like, when did that even become something you were aware of? Whatever that means to you, spirituality. I know that's a big question, but
and yes, and I've listened to some of your episodes, kind of getting an idea of what you're wanting here. So my mom was raised Catholic, and my dad was Southern Baptist over here in Corryton, and so they raised us in a Lutheran church. I remember going to church with them, but never really being involved.
So it wasn't an internal sense of, okay.
And then they divorced when I was about 10 years old. And my dad put air conditioning on Navy ships. And so we moved around between the two of them. Let's see. And my mom dealt with alcoholism. And so that was difficult for all of us. And so we went to go live with my dad for a little while she was in and out of treatment. And I remember being a teenager and just seeking that. My friends were going to church. I actually went to several different churches. I had a good Mormon friend, and I went to church with her too. And then, my dad would allow me to go to the other churches. And so I would do that. And then when I moved away to go to college, I moved out to Hawaii. My mom's family is from there. And so I started going to church on my own. And I really, really felt a connection to that, like something was missing in my life. But I really didn't know what that was. They talk about having this closeness and this peace through prayer and that relationship with God. And so I thought I had some insight to it, but I didn't, what's the right word? I didn't understand the power of it. I didn't really feel it. At that point.
So you were seeking something at that point, and church was the place that you knew to go to. Right.
Yeah. And so, let's see. Then I ended up getting divorced. I had my older two boys in Hawaii, and then I got divorced, and I moved to Tennessee, where my dad's family's from. Got remarried. Same thing. I married somebody who was a non-believer. And that was a struggle. I threw myself in the church. It was in a Baptist church, and started serving. I worked with the youth, and I was a counselor. I was baptized there, formally baptized there at the church. I remember, being sprinkled. I was told I was done that as a child, but really making that commitment.
Right, an adult.
As an adult. And at that point, I also had my son, Michael, who's now 10 years old. So I served in that church for about 8 years, and got divorced again. And I felt like I was connected as long as I was serving, but I did not feel the support within the church for what I was going through. And so I stopped attending that church, and now we are at First United Methodist, and I really, really enjoy being there. My son loves it there. Very involved with the youth. But the spiritual component, I've always felt like I had somebody who had my back, that I was going to survive.
Yeah.
And that was God.
Yeah.
You know, like I knew that there was I've had some really tough experiences that I didn't know whether or not I was going to come out of them, really. And I was always protected and I was safe. And I always attributed that to God. And through yoga practicing and my study of Christianity and the AAIT, it like brought it all together, where I really found this. It's like I got to that point where it's like, God is within me. This is that light. This is what it is. And so when I would practice yoga and we would practice Shavasana, it's like the end of the class where you are going into quiet, right? It's the end. It's the final resting pose. They actually call it corpse pose. So you're there. That was when I would actually hear God talking to me. So when I got quiet in yoga, I could really hear that. It was like I heard that voice within me, and I knew that was God. And they talk about you go through life experiences where you're supposed to trust your gut. What's stirring in you? It's like, and it's spiritual warfare. You know, what are you feeling? What is God telling you? What do you need to do in your life? And I always felt like I was being called to do something more and to help other people, but I didn't understand the capacity of that until I really found the acceptance and integration training.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
I thought, okay, well, I'll be a nurse, and then I'll be a nurse practitioner. This is going to help me help more people. I will coach others on their faith. I will coach them spiritually, but how do I get them to see that God's within them? How do I get them to see that they have these tools within themselves, that they don't need outside or external things to make them happy? It's all internal.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, I mean, so in relative to your life story, then the sort of, I guess what I hear you saying is you always had a sense internally of something, God, you know, being there with you, but it wasn't really until fairly recently of putting these pieces of your life's journey together that you really have felt. Yeah.
I mean,
that's cool.
I would always say I was a believer.
Yeah, sure.
But I really never understood the relationship and that connection to self.
Yeah.
And probably the last 10 years.
Yeah.
I'm 43. So
yeah. I love this intersects with a lot of what I do in teaching folks in the church. I'm always talking about in a very similar way. So I love that you really were hearing or experiencing the presence of God in that meditative, quiet prayer place in yoga. Because a lot of what I talk about with people is so much of what folks do, at least in Christianity, is talk at God, right? Treat God like a genie in the bottle. And people aren't learning to listen to this voice within them. And I do a lot of work with people about, I call them the languages that God uses to speak to us. And it might be gut. It might be audible. It might be physical. You know, and you sort of have to learn, what's the language God uses with me? And then start to trust that and listen to it. But most people never get beyond even just the like, oh, I'm supposed to be listening. Like, you know, a lot of people never even get there.
They ask God for stuff, right? Like, God, I want this to happen. Make this happen. You know, instead of sitting quiet, like, why is this happening? And exploring that and sitting in that and having that connection to what am I doing? How am I participating? Where's my role?
Right.
And what is happening?
And I'm in no way saying you shouldn't ask God for that. There's something very powerful about that too. You got to name things.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
But that's not. It's supposed to be a relationship, right? You in experiencing the Baptist church throughout your life. You know, of course, you hear personal relationship, right, with your Lord and Savior. But we say that all the time. But until you start to dig into that internal, like, what is that relationship? What does that look like? How do I do that? Right. And I think you have to find tools to turn within and to listen and to examine. I also just an aside, I think Jai and I might have talked about this a little bit, but how yoga, a lot of people's experience of yoga here in the West, at least, is purely just exercise. Right. And they don't even get that silence at the end or anything.
Oh, yeah. I have students that, I'm trying to get them to ground and get into Shavasana and have that quiet time so they can actually hear. You can't, if you're not quiet, you can't hear what God's trying to tell you, right? But just for them to have that peace and that quietness, they're doing handstands and flips, and I'm like, okay, hey, because they can't settle down. That's what makes them uneasy. And yoga teaches us, Baron Baptiste has this philosophy. It's finding comfort in your discomfort. So when you feel something, you want to run away from it because we don't like pain. We don't like to be uncomfortable. We want everything to go well and just kind of coast through life. And but when you find something that's uncomfortable, when you find something that's painful, I feel that God's trying to teach you something. He's trying to say, hey, you need to explore this a little bit and why you feel this way. And is this something or some pain or discomfort that's holding you back from progressing where you need to be in your life, right? His plan for you, like your whole, your experience. And
and that's certainly been part of my personal journey. I started, speaking of what is the language God uses to talk to you, for me, for whatever reason, it's always been, I know when I'm being offered an opportunity or feel like I'm being pushed into something or called into something, when it's the place I don't want to go, when it's something that I resist. I've learned over my life that, like, that's usually always, God-given. Which is a little bit uncomfortable,
No, it is.
Come on, man.
Like, I get it. You don't want to do this. This is going to hurt for a minute, but it'll just be a minute. And then the freedom and peace that you have at the end of it is really what's beautiful. And I also believe that it takes one person to see the light in another person, right? And when I say that, I mean, you have kids that come out of horrible circumstances, right? And they're kind of destined, like, oh, well, this was their background. Their parents were drug addicts. They'll never amount to anything, right? This is what they're going to be. And it takes one person to show them that they are worthy and that they do have beautiful gifts and they are uniquely made in His image and that they can make a contribution. So I think that it's really important at a very young age that kids do have a sense of identity and love, self-love, accomplishment, and support. And so I'm also doing this as part of a mission work in terms of providing equity in mental health care. So donating my time to healthcare providers, and I'm going to offer, I do offer like a sliding scale, and I do give my time away for free.
Yeah, oh, that's
because
wonderful.
I do believe in this so much. If my grandfather was very influential for me. He was that person for me. Like, you are good and you have gifts and you have something to give back to this world. And so you need to work hard on that and figure out who you are. Of course, I didn't understand that at a very young age. I knew, oh, well, this guy thinks I'm awesome. That's nice.
My daughter always tells me, yeah, but you're my dad.
Right. But that's a big deal.
I know.
It's a very big deal.
Sorry, I'm just because I'm always like, probably like your grandfather to my daughter. I'm always like, and my son, but he takes it. But you are good. I'm the one saying that kind of stuff. It's just, but you're my dad. Of course, you think that about me.
Right. Well, but people need to know that they're loved and they're accepted for who they are. And that helps with the self-acceptance piece, right? Ultimately, it's your work. But when we go back to that conditioned self, it's like, oh, well, this person didn't approve of me, or I did this in my life and that was bad, and this happened to me, so this was bad. And so it builds this whole narrative that you tell yourself that you're not worthy and you're not loved, you know? So having somebody in your life that loves you unconditionally does help kind of combat some of those negative beliefs. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No good segue for this, but you mentioned something, this might have been before we hit record, you were talking about, and I just think it's interesting within this context of, in yoga, you were noticing people, I'm assuming in the end, in the sort of meditation, in the end, that emotions were presenting. You said something like that. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I guess I'm just saying I find that fascinating, but I guess it is sort of similar to what we've been talking about. People push so much down or ignore so much or avoid so much that, if you get yourself into a state where you're physically tired, you know, and then you're, you know, able to get into a meditative state, those things are going to come and present because they've got to be processed. They've got to be worked through. Yeah. You know?
But if you resist it, it won't. And I mean, there's numerous medical journals that talk about negative emotional effects on your health, you know, or when you are harboring depression and pain and just negativity in your body, right? Emotional trauma, if you don't release it, that contributes to chronic illnesses, you know. And how do you get to where you're in a place where you're happy and you feel empowered to take care of your health? It's like, oh, well, I've got high blood pressure and I'm overweight and I've got diabetes and they get stuck. They can't see a way out, and then that becomes their story and their identity, and they're stuck. And so that contributes to their health negatively. So, yes, and in yoga, there are yoga postures that actually do invoke more of an emotional response, like hip openers. We store a lot of emotions in our hips. And so when you do
that why my hips hurt all the time?
Yeah, you might need to work some stuff out. But a lot of times, you know, and I practice. I go to the teachers that I know. I'm going to have an emotional response by practicing with them.
Wow.
Absolutely. They're going to call out a pose, and I'm going to get into it, and maybe they're going to put their hands on me to adjust me deeper into the pose. And that's, again, when I talk about you're supposed to breathe deeper into that space. And we can go into how breath is God. Very much so. So you're breathing into that space like, oh, this hurts. I don't want to do it. And I will tell my clients, you know, pain is different from tension.
Yeah.
When you feel the tension, you can send your breath into that area and you can find relief, and you can go a little deeper and explore that. But yes, emotions do come up because they're released. So there's samskara, and it's about emotional scars. That's the yoga term, but it's emotional scarring that's held in your tissues. So as you move in yoga, those are being broken up. More so than in exercise like running or something. This, you get your endorphins growing, but when you're still in a yoga posture and you're, you know, expanding those muscle fibers, and there's just that emotional response that happens, so stuff becomes released. That's why they have trauma-informed yoga, and you have to be careful, like when you're teaching somebody, because stuff does come up. So it's the connection with yoga and AAIT that I find they're just intertwined, because you are learning about how your body feels and that connection to your mind, and that you actually have some control over that and how you experience it. So if I'm feeling something like, oh, maybe I need to work on that. Why am I feeling that way? Well, what happened to me today? And so instead of just going, oh, I don't like that feeling, I'm going to run away from it and never explore it again, that just sits in there.
Yeah.
You know, and negative emotions contribute like to chronic illnesses. They contribute to just discord in your entire life.
Yeah. Well, and again, big picture society culture, I feel like though therapy is getting less and less, you know, stigmatized, and yoga obviously has made it into kind of mainstream thinking, there's still, even through those avenues, as I already named, like depending on where you go for yoga, those can be very different experiences.
Absolutely.
It can be just purely exercise. Depending on where you go to therapy, it can be, as we already covered. So it's just, I love hearing that, a different approach to yoga, what I would consider the actual traditional understanding of yoga, is being taught out there, and that there are avenues for therapy like AAIT. That's exciting to me. In Praise the Light, so then in your business, is it purely AAIT, or are you also offering yoga?
No, I do individualized yoga.
Okay.
And maybe small groups. So like if a couple wants to come, or I've had parents come with their kids too. So I'll do small groups. I have a studio in my home, and then I have an office space area where I do AAIT.
Cool.
Yeah. So it's better because, yoga is like therapy, for the individual. Somebody can come to me. You're not in a big classroom where you're trying to follow the instructor, which I still love. And I offer classes in a studio, and I have a studio locally in Maryville that I send clients to. It's called the Yoga Mix, and I practice there. I love it. But in my home studio, I offer one-on-one because I feel like it's really important for people to not be afraid to try yoga. People will say, I'm not flexible. And I'll say, well, it's your mind that's not flexible, not your body, because we'll get your body there once you break down these barriers of what you feel like you can't do. But really seeing their progress. I love the one-on-one coaching. I get so fired up when somebody says that they can't do something, and then I see them able to do that. Because we set ourselves up for failure. We are the roadblocks in our way to achieving what we can achieve. And I believe anybody can do anything, So I really like that one-on-one coaching with individuals.
That's really exciting. And I do feel like there's a hunger in the culture right now. I don't know if you're noticing this, but I see through various people, I'm thinking my buddy John Montori, who's been on here and is a friend of mine, and he's really exploring ways in his life to offer a very different approach, but just offer things like this, right? Particularly, he's thinking of men and opportunities for men to come and express emotion and be vulnerable and authentic. There's something happening now where people are starting to maybe acknowledge the need for the necessity of doing this kind of work, and there's a hunger for it. Is that click with you? I mean, are you noticing that around?
Absolutely. So I have a 10-year-old son, and he'll come home and, I'm bored, Mom. I'm bored. And he kept saying that to me over and over again. And I'm like, well, buddy, you've got to find something else to do to not be bored. Are you really bored? Let's talk about some feelings. Are you what else are you feeling?
The feeling circle.
Right.
Yeah.
Really? No, but I bought one.
Yeah, they're great.
Right.
Yeah.
And I showed it to him are you frustrated in this moment because you can't find something to be entertaining for, and then also teaching, I think men are taught to suppress their emotions. It's not okay to feel that. You need to be strong. Vulnerability is something that is very scary. So I have 3 boys. So trying to teach them to be okay with their emotions, and that's actually a great source of interpersonal freedom and strength.
Yeah, and there's another angle to that. I've been thinking about this a lot recently with men in particular. There's you're not supposed to be emotional. So I think there's another layer at play, because of what I've seen in men is, even if they're able to be emotional by themselves and alone, that's a victory. That's great. But there's another level where, if they allow themselves to be emotional and vulnerable with their loved ones or in front of people, after, there's a guilt associated with it because of what you're saying, that we're taught that that's not manly.
Right. Or shame.
So exactly. Yeah, so there's this weird, I don't know what we do about
fear,
that.
Because it's self-preservation.
I guess.
Yeah.
But I just have encountered that conversation a lot recently, where men are able, they'll actually take a risk and they'll be vulnerable with their spouse or whoever.
Right.
And then there's after the fact. It's not it didn't reward them. They feel shameful afterwards.
And then do they retreat?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a messed up dynamic, like.
And that's really hard for their partner too, because the feminine side wants that emotional connection. Right.
Sorry, I don't know.
No, that's okay. No, that's very true. You see that in relationships. You really do. But I think that men do need to be empowered to be emotional. We all need to be, because our emotions teach us about ourselves. They teach us what we need to work on. And then once you process those emotions, they're not as heavy. They're not as reactive, and your emotions are coming from somewhere in that conditioned self.
Yeah.
They're coming from something that you were imprinted on in your lifetime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What for you have been the most sort of quote unquote spiritual experiences of your life? So you walked us basically through like your timeline. I feel like brought us up to kind of today where you are. Do you have? It sort of sounds to me like it's been through the work in some sense, but I just wanted to. That's one of those questions I ask everybody. I just want to know, like, when Jennifer experiences God, what does that look like? Has it been through the yoga and through the practices, or have there been other instances?
Throughout. I mentioned, watching my mother deal with addiction off and on through her life, and understanding that that was something that I couldn't control it, couldn't stop it, couldn't save it. It was something that she had to walk through, and it was her suffering, and seeing that created a lot of compassion in my life. And then working with patients as a provider, I see God every day in the suffering and in the beauty of it. Big experiences for me, going through divorce. That I've also had a difficult relationship that I was coming out of, and that taught me a lot about my relationship with God, and learning that, again, that I was okay, and that I was loved, and that I was accepted, that God was always there with me, So
instead of some, like, as I would say, like inbreaking of the spirit, some moment, it's for you, it's been sort of through the journey of
little things in my life,
suffering, struggle, and coming through, and knowing that you were guided or accompanied or were supported. So it was tapping into that relationship and discovering that within myself, but really through this work. I credit a lot of it to that, and just knowing that it was kind of always there, but never really understanding it. And I did have several things happen along my life that I definitely could have gone down a different path, and I didn't. Something kept me going and picked me up, and I just trust that was God all the way. Has that sense, you sort of talked about this a little bit through your church journey. Have you always known that God was there with you? Was that a sense you always had, or did that come at some point? Sorry, I know these are
no, it's okay. No. I just want to. I've always felt, I think. Well, I always knew something was something was there, because there were situations that I was put in as a young child where I'm very surprised that I'm alive today. Okay. And that's my only explanation of it.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And the piece too, like the survivor, right? Like how did I survive certain situations? And it was always trusting that God. But then that also too is like you're separating yourself. Something else is taking care of me. Somebody else is taking care of me. Really learning that it's part of me too.
Right.
That
can have a downside if you're always putting it out.
Exactly. It's kind of like putting that power in your pastor, if you don't mind, or another person, versus giving yourself some credit and some accountability for how you go through your life journey.
Yeah. Yes, I hear you. I guess I just want to point out that is parallel to my story. I always had that sense. I just knew it, but it was fascinating for me in the ministry to learn that that's not everyone's experience. And so I desire to say to you, like, that's a gift and a blessing that you've always had that, because so many people go through life. Some never feel that. And some, it just sort of comes in this breaking point moment, but it's really, I think it's such a gift to sort of have always known that connection to. Yeah.
And I've always believed, you say walk like Jesus, live like Jesus, loving everybody and accepting everyone. We all bleed the same. We all have pain, and we all have, all have suffering. And, when I see people that there's like a breakdown where, well, they're not as important in me as I am, or, we're not equal. And, I get real fired up about that. But I see the light in everybody, and I want everybody to see that light within themselves. And I feel like that's so important. And that insight, that learning that I had that light within myself was probably the most transformative thing in my entire life, was understanding that what it really meant to feel that connection with God. And that's through the breath work, that's through the prayer, that's through the quiet, that's through sitting in the times of suffering and just being okay with who you are and what is. Not having to understand why, just being there.
You're reminding me of, in some ways, that's what I'm always preaching to people. And I don't know how familiar you are with, like, church seasons. I guess through the Catholic Church and Lutheran, you probably got some of that. But I've been saying exactly what you're saying from the pulpit for the past few weeks, because I feel like so few people actually ever move. I guess we already sort of said this, but like move from that relationship with God where it's, God, you do everything, like we were talking about before, stating prayers, needs, to moving to understanding that actually what Jesus was saying was, you have everything already. You are loved. You have everything already. You make heaven on earth. Yes. And that's totally like where we are right now is Pentecost. And that's what I used to tell people, like, this was when that happened. Like, the Spirit was given to you. Yes. Jesus went away. Yes. Spirit was given to all of you, because you are to do the rest now, and you are to be that light now. But getting that understanding to click with people, for all the various reasons we've named, right? Worthiness, all that stuff. It's very hard to get that light bulb to turn on. Right. Yeah.
And that you don't have to do anything to deserve it.
Yeah. You're not being good in the world to get God's love. You're doing good in the world and spreading love in the world because you have already been loved, right? And that sounds so easy to say, but that's a massive distinction.
Because of everything that they've experienced along their lifetime that has taught them, well, if I don't do this, then I'm not this. I have to, and I feel like we do live in a culture where, our success is based on how many things we've achieved or how busy we are. And it's not, we're not given credit for just existing and being who we are.
Yeah. So, I also wanted to, you said something that I love, and we'll probably already be on the same page with, but about breath being God.
Yes.
Or say more.
So, well, you talk about that breath when you saying like amen, and you're taking in the Spirit, right? Inhale Jesus, exhale Satan. No, just right. But but just the breath work that connects you. That's that spiritual breath. When you're inhaling and you're exhaling, you can increase your heart rate. You can lower your heart rate just with your breath work. Calming yourself down, reducing anxiety, spiritually. That's what I believe. It's that Spirit that you're taking in every time you breathe. And God filled our lungs with that air. And so...
And it is life.
It is life.
Breath is life. You can't...
Yeah. Right. So we've got pranayama breathing, which is it's the life force, the air that we breathe and the energy. It's all connected. So that's what I...
Okay. Yeah. I just have I'll show it to you when we're done. I have a thing on my wall that actually William, who's going to be our curate, gave me because he got so I've said this very thing so many times. So he got me this. It's a picture. It's an artwork. It's lungs, and on the lungs it has Yahweh.
Yes.
Which most people know Yahweh. People understand that as like a name for God. But there's a teaching out there that says, so in Hebrew there's no vowels, so it's just YHWH, and the teaching goes that the actual only right way to say Yahweh is is breath, right? And so God being right. So same thing, same message, But that's one that's near and dear to me.
Right. When they say, you take your last breath when you die, in your spirit ascends.
Yeah. Right. So with not pure light. What's
Praise the Light?
Praise the Light. I knew I was going to mess that up. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
With Praise the Light, with your work there, tell us a little bit more about, well, one, how do people find you? Obviously, they could just Google that, right? And whatever. Tell people the best way to find you.
Yes.
And then who do you mainly work with? What sort of clients do you have? What do you look for in clients?
Sure. So on the website, praisethelight.com, you can send me an
Praise
email.
the light, people. Yeah.
Praise the light. That's right. Praising the light all day. But so the website, you can email me and request a session. I meet everybody that is interested for free. It's a free consultation. Typically, the first session, if we agree to do work, is going to be 90 minutes because I'm going to get a little bit of a background on you and talk about AAIT. And so there's phases within the session. You're meeting, seeking understanding the problem, collaborating, like, this is what we're going to do today, Brett. Are you comfortable with this? And then working on the issue. And then when we're done with the protocol, I check to see if your reactivity has been resolved. I can do that just by watching you breathe and go through the process. And then afterwards, you're seeking understanding and resolution of the problem. And do you feel that, like, the problem is going to come back into your life against your will? Do you have to allow it? So it's usually about an hour-long session that we go through, and I might give you homework, something to work on for the next time. And so it's been word of mouth right now. I do some offering on social media, and I plan on doing more of that in the future. That's not my strong suit, so I'm getting more involved with that. So word of mouth, email me. Who is my client? Everyone.
Okay.
Really.
So age doesn't...
Age. I said, 10 to 12-year-olds and up, just because I'm actually a family nurse practitioner. So I'm trained to work with all across the lifespan. And with AAIT, there have been results seen in kids as young as 4, and it just depends on the processes. It's individualized decision.
Yeah. So worth a shot.
Yes.
Come have the intake.
Right. If somebody,
kind of thing.
Yes. I had a mom say, my child's 10 and she's really struggling. She's anxious about playing basketball and I don't know what to do with her. She can't calm down and she's got these horrible just behaviors that she goes through because she's so stressed out before it's performance anxiety. I can teach her how to reduce that anxiety. So anybody who's dealing with stress, depression, loss, divorce, I've got a lot of experience in like toxic relationships, coaching women out of them, and in recovery. So yeah,
good. Yeah,
I'd listen to anybody and see if we can meet. I don't prescribe medication, so that is a disclaimer I have. Even though I'm licensed to do so, I'm functioning in this role as a coach.
Yeah. Cool. What I assume too, like would this apply to, I'm thinking young girls today. My daughter's near and dear to my heart, and just the struggles I see her and her friends go through as teenagers in terms of just image that connects with worth, right?
Yes.
I don't know. Is that kind of some stuff that?
Yeah, that's very important. I was raised in a household where nothing ever did was good enough. I was your typical type A, straight A student, still wasn't getting that approval that I needed. And that kind of led me to seek relationships where I've experienced similar things where I was trying to be perfect so I'd be loved and accepted, because I didn't have that within myself. And so this work really taught me how to love and accept myself. So absolutely, the younger we get it instilled into our children, the better, because there's so much social pressure for them to be perfect. I mean, social media is awful, and then they get into, relationships with people, and they're trying to be okay in their eyes, and they've not really developed a full sense of self. Their frontal lobe too is not developed till they're in their 20s. And so when you talk about being able to manage your emotions and your reactivity, you want to teach them techniques as young as you can. Yeah. So they can cope with life, because it's going to come at them faster than,
Yeah, tell me about it, man. I'm in the thick of that stuff.
Right, right. Yeah. And emotional, the fact that you can teach them how to process their emotions, that's just an amazing gift. I think that should be a part of every curriculum in school.
I know.
They just don't offer it. And,
Yeah, I know. I don't mean this to sound negative, but it's like, or somehow arrogant, but it's like, I often think about, this is similar to what we were already talking about in terms of people's acceptance of or exposure to therapy and just different avenues of mental, emotional health. But, here I am in my family, and I've had a lot of psychology background, counseling and ministry. I mean, a lot of experience with that stuff. Like, I'm about talking about the feelings, right? And even in my family, I'm sitting there going, I'm doing a horrible job at this. Like, how do you, so it makes me think of families out there, so many who don't even have those understandings or the language for that themselves as parents. Like, just what a need there is for this kind of work. Yeah. What a need.
And you are essentially a caregiver too. So there's truth in the caregiver fatigue. You are counseling people all day long, and then you go home, and I'm sure it's overwhelming to, my family needs this too. How do I provide this too? So you feel tapped out.
You're naming a sore one on me. Yeah, I have my own, like, almost guilt around that, because exactly what you said. You come home and I'm done, and people think I'm probably an extrovert, but I'm an introvert that I need to recharge. And so, I feel that all the time. Like, I don't have anything else when I come home.
Yes. And how do you tend to yourself and be kind to yourself in that state? Yeah. You have to take care of yourself, so then you can then take care of others. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, is there, I don't want to hold you here all day long. Is anything else you want to say about Praise the Light, or just about Jennifer's spiritual journey? Anything else you want to name?
I'm grateful for having the opportunity to be here today, and I'm grateful for everything I've experienced in my life, good and bad, because it's brought me to where I am here today. And I just hope that I can touch as many people as I can and share this with others, because I definitely see a need for mental health, counseling and services, and the lack of access to them. So I'm hoping to make a difference in that way.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, thank you again for taking a leap of faith and talking to somebody you never met, and for coming and telling your story. And I'm excited for you with Praise the Light and the work that you're doing. And I'm not joking. I really might come and
hey, we can check it out. When we get done, it'll take 15 minutes. You can experience it for yourself.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah,
but blessings on this, on your work, I'm excited to see where that goes, and I'm glad you're out there doing it.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let me know. So check out Praise the Light, folks, and and if you ever in the future want to come back, if you got more things growing and happening, with Praise the Light or whatever, or just in your life, would love to chat again. So
sure, sounds great.
Thanks for doing it. All right, great. Take care.